The Where Our Minds Wander podcast may contain sensitive content and explicit language. Listener discretion is advised.
Greetings, fellow wanderers, to the places our minds wander.
Where strange lights speed beyond reason across a clear night sky.
The house at the end of the road, where disembodied voices whisper and strange noises make the living shiver.
Lurking shadows hiding on the edge of the woods just outside your back door.
Odd, true events throughout time that lead you down the rabbit hole. I'm Wes.
And I'm Beth.
And this is Where Our Minds Wander. Hello and welcome to Where Our Minds Wander, all you fellow wanderers. I'm Wes, and that's my wife and co-host, Beth.
Hello, everyone. You know, it dawned on me earlier today that we haven't mentioned our merch store in quite a bit. And you and I went a little sticker crazy with our laptops, and we actually have a bunch of designs that our listeners can buy in our store on TeePublic.
Yeah, that we did. And yeah, Valentine's Day is coming up, and if you're looking for a unique gift idea, we have shirts and hoodies and mugs. There's all kinds of stuff.
Or you could just buy something for yourself. I mean, screw Valentine's Day. Buy yourself something. But to each their own. I'm just kidding. That's just my opinion.
Well, yeah, I'm not a big fan of Valentine's Day. One day out of the year, to celebrate your loved one seemed kind of ridiculous to me. I think it should be something that you do for your loved one every day with some little gesture.
I know. You're very good about that.
That I am. Well, it's not sucking up. It's just because I love you.
Oh, well, I've never accused you of sucking up. But you do very nice things for me every day.
So, done with the
sucking up.
Sucking up. What are you talking about tonight?
A couple of scary theaters.
Oh, I love scary theaters.
The year was 1888. As the cast took their final bows on stage at Melbourne, Australia's incredibly grand Princess Theatre and Opera House, all was well. Applause thundered as Frederick Baker, known as Federici, took his bow. His performance as Mephistopheles was a plum role, and he was magnificent. Faust, of course, is an opera in which a scholar makes a deal with the devil to gain more knowledge, and Mephistopheles is the prince of hell. Baker, or Federici, was a well-loved actor, and the cast welcomed the applause thrown their way. As they exited the stage, they were met with strange and alarming news. Federici was dead.
Oh, no.
Confused and taken aback, the cast insisted this must be a joke or a misunderstanding. Baker had just been on stage with them and had just taken his bows. But no, the theater manager insisted that 38-year-old Federici had suffered a heart attack while being lowered on the trapdoor platform into hell during his final scene. They had rushed him into the green room, and although they had tried to resuscitate him, he was most certainly and sadly dead.
So he died as he was going into hell?
Exactly.
Wow.
This was the first, but certainly not the last time Frederick Federici Baker was seen at the Princess Theatre. The Princess Theatre is, like I said, absolutely incredibly grand. As the oldest theater in Melbourne, it has had its own rich history. Originally built in 1854 during the gold rush by an Irish-American entrepreneur named Tom Mooney, it was simply a barn-like structure. Called Astley's Amphitheater, it had an equestrian ring in the middle and a stage on one end.
I just love an old theater, especially the balcony area.
In 1857, the amphitheater was renovated into the Princess's Theatre and Opera House. But 20 years later, in 1877, it was renovated once again and reopened as the Princess Theatre. By Federici's time, the Princess Theatre was gorgeous. Owned by the Triumvirate, a trio of actors and producers, it was completely remodeled by architect William Pitt into a Second Empire-style beauty. Seen today, the pale yellow facade is dotted by multiple arched windows and has 3 main towers, each one topped by a dome of gray and white tile. But it's the central stained glass window that really catches your eye, exquisitely done in yellows with cascading pink and red flowers. All 3 arched windows have a central stained glass medallion as well. Centered over it all is a winged golden statue blowing a long horn.
That's got to be gorgeous when the sun comes through.
It's beautiful. The interior of the Princess Theater is no letdown either. Marble staircases lead to ornate balconies, since you love balconies, overlooking a moody stage. 1,452 red plush seats curve towards the stage, creating an intimate space despite its grand size. By its completion in 1886, it boasted all electrical stage lighting and a retractable ceiling. It was quite the place, and it should be, considering it cost £50,000. But what about Federici? First and foremost, he was an actor. Accolades are important to him. Critiques are important to him. Performances are important to him. At least, they seem to be to his ghost. Although that final curtain call of Faust in 1888 may have been the first sighting of Federici's ghost, it certainly wasn't the last. For years, right up to the present day, Federici still seems to be treading the boards at the Princess Theater. Playgoers might witness strange, unexplained flashing lights during performances, and some may even catch a glimpse of him during evening shows. He appears as a tall, handsome man with graying temples, which may not be all that unusual, except he is always beautifully dressed in late 1800s evening attire. He always sits in the center of the theater's dress circle, or second tier, in the second or third row. But he doesn't stay seated. When he catches sight of a critic's expression, he is known to change seats so he can watch their faces more closely. He also isn't shy about his own opinions about a performance. His face will often frown if he feels an actor's performance is weak. He's been seen taking notes and brushing his hair back in exasperation if he doesn't approve of an inferior performance. When he's had enough, he'll simply walk out, and then backstage actors and staff may experience the sensation of someone brushing past them, only to turn and find no one.
Well, I'd like to experience that for myself.
I don't know if I'd want to be on the receiving end of a bad review by him, though. Sounds like he was a tough critic of other actors.
No, I'd just like to sit in one of the seats and see if I can get a glimpse of him.
Yeah. Despite this, a visit by Federici during a show is considered good luck, and to encourage him to attend, the theater holds a seat for him at every performance in the dress circle. So, although the Princess Theater may have only one resident thespian ghost, the St. James Theater in Wellington, New Zealand, boasts many.
Oh, another theater.
Yes. The St. James Theater isn't as old as the Princess. John Fuller, a vaudeville entertainer, bought the land in 1899 and converted an old church hall into a theater, which he named His Majesty's Theater. Unfortunately, it was deemed a fire hazard by 1911 and demolished. Fuller was not deterred, and he had his theater rebuilt in just 9 months, reopening as the St. James Theater in 1912. Fuller's company performed slapstick comedies, but also hosted balladeers, jugglers, acrobats, tumblers, and dancers. In the 1930s, the theater was converted into a movie theater and remained successful until Fuller's death. After that, it passed through several owners and closed its doors in 1987. It suffered such decline that it was almost demolished, but in 1993, it received an $18.5 million restoration.
Well, I'm glad they didn't demolish it. You know, there's just too much history and beauty in a lot of these places to just let them fall into disrepair.
I know. It makes me so sad when they knock things down. I'm glad when they can find the money to refurbish them. Throughout its long decline and restoration, the several ghosts haunting the place remained. Today, the facade of the St. James Theater is somewhat reminiscent of the American White House, although more boxy. It sports 2 white columns on either side of the front door and some scroll work along its 3 stories that gives it a stately appearance. It could almost be mistaken for a mansion, except for the dark gray lettering spelling out St. James Theatre across the top. Today, it is the official home of the Royal New Zealand Ballet, but if you believe the stories, there are other things waiting in the wings besides dancers. Most of the specters there are considered friendly, if not downright life-saving. The most often talked about spirit is affectionately called Yuri. Staff and ballet patrons believe Yuri was a Russian dancer who fell to his death from the catwalk in the early days of the theater. Some say he accidentally fell, while others say perhaps he was pushed by a female castmate. Maybe she was a little upset with him. I don't know.
Who knows what kind of history they perhaps had? You never know.
Yuri lets his presence be known by flipping lights back on immediately after staff has turned them off. But besides silly pranks, he also allegedly saved the life of the same movie projectionist twice. The story goes that the projectionist was fumbling around in the fully dark theater, feeling for the light switch when he was suddenly shoved backwards. When he was finally able to turn on the lights, he realized that if he'd taken another step further just moments before, he would have fallen all the way down into the orchestra pit. This same projectionist was in the theater with his infant son in his arms, and as he walked across the stage, a loud crack filled the air. A beam had split and was falling to the stage. Before the man could react, he was again shoved forward and out of danger as the huge beam crashed to the stage. But as he fell, he lost his grip on his infant son. The projectionist swore an unseen force gently held his son in midair for several meters before placing him safely back on stage.
Wow, that's an incredible story.
It is really cool. But Yuri isn't the only benevolent ghost at St. James's. Staff have claimed to hear singing as if an entire boys' choir is performing. As they follow the sound, it moves so that they can never pinpoint exactly where it's coming from. The legend goes that there was a boys' choir touring company that performed at St. James during World War II. When they left New Zealand by boat for their next destination, the boat never arrived, and the boys' choir was never heard from again. Now, a story like that seems to me like it could be substantiated by some historical research, so I did try, and I did find that there were several boys' choirs traveling during World War II, like the Vienna Boys' Choir. But unless I spent several months just searching, I don't think I'd come across any evidence that any of their boats sank at sea.
Well, you really can't say that it didn't happen. Perhaps down the line with some more extensive research, you might find the answer.
And I will probably look for it too, because I was intrigued by that story. But regardless of whether it's true or not, it has to be both beautiful and creepy to hear an entire boys' choir singing in the auditorium of the St. James Theater and not being able to locate the source.
Yeah, that'd be pretty spectacular and creepy.
One spirit at the St. James that isn't so friendly is known as the Wailing Woman. It's believed that her life came to a tragic end back in Fuller's vaudeville days, that she was a vaudeville actress who was booed off the stage while trying to make a comeback. The legend is that she took her own life and now she wanders the St. James in constant fits of jealousy. Staff and performers often hear her wailing from the dressing rooms as if she is completely overcome with anger and despair. And her jealousy actually manifests as physical outbursts towards successful living actresses. Apparently, Barbara Windsor, a well-known English actress, was performing at the St. James. For our American listeners, she was in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Oh, yeah, with Dick Van Dyke.
Yes, and more recently, she was the voice of the Dormouse in the Alice in Wonderland films with Johnny Depp. But anyway, she sprained her ankle during a performance at the St. James, and another actress broke her foot. Still, other actresses have fallen from ladders and suddenly suffered laryngitis in the middle of shows. But it was Peter Jackson, director of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, who had the most startling encounter with the Wailing Woman while he was staying in an apartment directly across the street from the theater. He said in an interview that he woke up one morning and there was a figure in his room. She was screaming in anger. He felt that she was about 50 years old. He said he was terrified by her, and suddenly she went from standing at the end of his bed to gliding across the floor before disappearing through the wall.
Wow. It's bad enough waking up in the morning to an alarm, but can you imagine waking up to a ghostly figure screaming, and you can't even smack her with your pillow because she just vanishes?
That's what you do with women screaming. You awake in the morning, you smack them with pillows.
Well, or put the pillow over their face.
Nice.
Carry on.
Whether you believe the tales of the Princess Theater and the St. James Theater, they certainly add a layer of mystique to any performances you might attend there. Imagine not knowing anything about the alleged ghosts that haunt both places and witnessing something during a show when you are surrounded by strangers in the dark, and the last thing you want to do is draw attention away from the performers on stage.
That's pretty creepy.
Hey, did you know? Scientists at the University of Hong Kong have recently created a robot straight out of the Terminator. Inspired by sea cucumbers who are able to squish their bodies through the tiniest of openings and then pop right back to their original shape, these new metal robots, the prototype is the size of a Lego figure, are made from magnetic neodymium iron boron microparticles embedded in gallium, which means they can melt at very low temperatures just by using a magnetic field. So what does that mean? It means that very soon these tiny bots could be put in a human body where they would instantly melt, surround any foreign bodies, solidify around them, and be pulled out, bringing the foreign body with them. If the very thought freaks you out, don't worry, they're still at the experimental stages. Who'da thunk it? So where are we wandering with you tonight?
Well, tonight, I'm going to tell everyone about a gentleman that I found to be quite fascinating. The figure inside the case at University College London sits perfectly upright, his gloved hands resting on his thighs. He wears a straw hat on top of his head and has long gray hair trailing down from the hat's sides. His face holds a relaxed, if thoughtful expression, as though he is waiting for a friend to stop by and chat. His ruffled white shirt under his black coat is pristine. His tan trousers are tucked into his white socks, and his black shoes rest firmly on the floor. His cane rests at a slant between his knees. By all accounts, the figure in the glass case is just a typical gentleman from 1832. Except, well, the figure is anything but typical. It's in fact an auto icon.
What's an auto icon?
Well, by definition, it's something that serves as an icon representing itself.
Okay, so what does that mean?
It means that the figure in the case representing Jeremy Bentham is actually Jeremy Bentham.
Okay, explain please.
The figure in the case isn't a mannequin of Bentham. It's actually Bentham himself, preserved for almost 200 years.
All right then. Why?
Well, because that's exactly what he wanted.
Oh.
Jeremy Bentham was born in London in 1748. Considered a child prodigy, he began learning Latin at age 3 and reportedly read multiple volumes of English history at that young of an age. By 7, he could play Handel's sonatas on the violin. He was admitted into the law program at Oxford at age 12 and received a bachelor's degree at 16 and his master's at 19, but he never actually practiced law. Instead, he focused on criticizing it. Regarded as the founder of utilitarianism, the idea that it is the greatest happiness of the greatest number that is the measure of right and wrong. He was a staunch supporter of individual and economic freedoms, including the separation of church and state, freedom of speech, and equal rights for women. He felt that people should have the right to divorce and that, quote, homosexual acts should be decriminalized. He argued for the abolition of slavery and the end to capital punishment. He also argued that any sort of physical punishment to children should be illegal, as well as animal cruelty. He thought the idea of birthrights being an order from God was nonsense upon stilts.
Wow, what year was this?
Well, he was born in 1748, so some of this could have been pre-1800s.
He was a badass.
He coined dozens of new words, several of which we still use on a daily basis, like international, maximize, minimize, alleviating, collaborator, detachable, exhaustive, informational, lengthiness, locating, marginalized, percentage, and swallowable, just to name a few.
I was right. He's a total badass. But in all seriousness, it sounds like he was incredibly intelligent and way ahead of his time.
Well, that he was, but he was also considered a little bit eccentric.
Of course he was.
For example, he had a teapot that he called Dickie that no one was allowed to touch.
Oh.
He also owned 2 walking sticks that he named Dobbin and Dapple. And he fed his beloved cat, Sir Reverend John Langbourne, macaroni. He believed in the health benefits of circumgyrating, which he did every single day for 2 hours, beginning at 6 a.m.
What is that?
Circumgyrating?
Yeah.
It means jogging.
Oh.
I know, it sounds more like he's doing some circular hip movements.
Yeah. Shaking in circles.
Right. He was 21 years old when he first started his instructions for his auto icon. His finished 1832 will stated, quote, "My body I give to my dear friend Dr. Southwood Smith, to be disposed of in a manner hereinafter mentioned, and I direct he will take my body under his charge and take the requisite and appropriate measures for the disposal and preservation of several parts of my bodily frame in the manner expressed in the paper annexed to this my will, and at the top of which I have written auto icon. The skeleton will cause to be put together in such a manner as that the whole figure may be seated in a chair usually occupied by me when living, in the attitude in which I am sitting when engaged in thought in the course of time employed in writing. I direct that the body thus prepared shall be transferred to my executor. He will cause the skeleton to be clad in one of the suits of black occasionally worn by me. The body so clothed, together with the chair and the staff, in my later years borne by me. He will take charge of, and for containing the whole apparatus, he will cause to be prepared an appropriate box or case, and will cause to be engraved in conspicuous characters on a plate to be affixed thereon, and also on the labels of the glass cases in which the preparations of the soft parts of my body shall be contained. My name at length with the letters O.B., followed by the day of my decease. If it should so happen that my personal friends and other disciples should be disposed to meet together on some day or days of the year for the purpose of commemorating the founder of the greatest happiness systems of morals and legislation, my executor will from time to time cause to be conveyed to the room in which they meet the said box or case with the contents therein to be stationed in such part of the room as to the assembled company shall seem meet.
Wow. So he asks his friend to basically stuff him, turn him into like a taxidermied person and put him in a case and then wheel him into meetings where his friends are.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. That's kind of cool, I guess.
Well, yeah, it's different. And amazingly enough, that's exactly what happened. Dr. Smith publicly dissected his corpse just the way Bentham asked him to. And then Dr. Smith cleaned Bentham's body and patted it, very much like a taxidermist would. He was dressed in his own clothes, encased in a grand-looking wooden cabinet with a glass front, and placed in Dr. Smith's house just exactly as Bentham wanted. Well, not exactly as he wanted. There were some issues with Bentham's head during the embalming process. It didn't turn out so well, and ended up looking more like an Egyptian mummy that was just discovered in a tomb.
Oh.
Yeah. So Dr. Smith ended up commissioning a wax replica. The wax replica is pretty astounding, and it looks pretty real. He has a kind, patient look on his face, with a prominent brow and clear blue eyes. He has a slight dimple in his chin. He kind of resembles a cross between Benjamin Franklin and the Quaker Oats guy.
The guy on the Quaker Oats packaging?
Yeah. But his real embalmed head was also included in the display. It was placed between his feet at the bottom of the cabinet, so everyone could see it if they chose to glance down.
Oh my gosh.
In 1850, the auto icon was moved to South Cloisters of University College London's Wilkins building. And as you would expect, once college students got involved, there were some pretty outlandish claims.
I bet.
One rumor persisted that some students had stolen Bentham's head and ransomed it for 100 pounds.
Oh, no.
That, thankfully, never really happened. There's also the rumor that the auto icon is wheeled into some college council meetings and his attendance is taken down in the minutes, as well as his vote of yay or nay. This, too, is just a myth that has never happened. A third rumor, which may be just the only true one, is that when Bentham was still living, he carried 2 glass eyeballs around with him in his pocket that he wanted to be used in his auto icon.
Hopefully his cat never found them and batted them around. Can you imagine hearing your own glass eyeballs rolling across the floor?
Well, he was quite an extraordinary, eccentric man. I don't know why he'd be carrying, glass eyeballs around with him.
If you see him out on the street and he's got his hand in his pocket and you think, do you want to look at my eyeballs?
Yeah, you could go all kinds of places with that. And speaking of Bentham's severed head, it didn't always stay at his feet. It was determined in 1948 that the head needed more protection, so it was placed in a wooden box designed specifically to hold it. But they didn't really take into account the size of the cabinet, and since the box didn't fit anymore between his feet, it was placed on the top of the cabinet. In 1956, the box was moved into a plinth over the door. In 2003, the auto icon's clothes and wax head were being prepared for a journey to Germany, where it was going to be on loan. The experts discovered something very alarming. The clothes and wax head were infested with woolly bear beetles.
Oh, no.
They were able to get rid of the infestation, but Bentham wasn't on display for a bit while they fixed him.
Well, that's probably a good thing. He'd be sitting in the box in his underwear.
With a bunch of woolly bears. In 2020, the entire auto icon was moved, except for his severed head, this time to the ground floor of the student center of the college. And it was placed in a clear glass display.
Where's his head?
His mummified head is kept in a safe on campus, in an undisclosed location, of course.
Probably a good idea.
It is taken out once a year by professional conservationists who check it for decay. As far as mummified severed heads go, it's still in pretty spectacular shape, based on the recent pictures I found. It's pretty fascinating to look at.
I'll have to look at it. It's online?
Yes, it is.
Oh, cool.
Now, some students may be under the impression that Jeremy Bentham was the founder of the college, but he wasn't.
He might be responsible for a good number of words they use in their papers, though.
You can go see the auto icon for yourself, if you'd like, even if you're not a student. You just have to make an appointment first.
You know, when you first started off, I thought it sounded kind of gross, but it's actually kind of cool. And I'd never heard of it before, but I wonder if any of our listeners have actually seen it.
I don't know. If you have, hit us up on Facebook and tell us about it.
That would be cool. We'd like to hear if you've seen the auto icon.
Yeah, it's something I'd like to see in person for myself.
Yeah, or if any of you have been to the Princess Theater or the St. James Theater, we'd love to hear about it.
Well, I guess that about wraps it up for this episode.
Yeah, and if you would like to know more about the places that we covered tonight, you can always check out our sources in our show notes. And until then, we'll be back next week with an all-new episode of Where Our Minds Wander.
See y'all soon.
Thank you for joining us. We look forward to traveling with you again to the places where our minds wander.
If you like what you heard, please take a moment and provide us with a 5-star rating and a comment on your favorite listening platform. It really helps us move up the list and become more visible on the podcast charts so new people can find us.
Thank you all for your continued support.
See you all next week for an all-new episode of Where Our Minds Wander.